Thanksgiving was only a few hours away, but Mary couldn't bring herself to feel the usual excitement. The cold Colorado wind rattled the windows of her small farmhouse as she stood in her kitchen, staring at the bare wooden table. Her late husband had always been the one to plan the holiday, hunting turkeys, preparing pies, and filling their home with warmth and laughter. But now, the house felt hollow. The cupboards were nearly empty, with only a few cans of beans and a half loaf of bread remaining. 6 children, ranging from ages 3 to 12, sat quietly around the table, their little stomachs growling softly. Mary swallowed her pride and her fear, forcing a smile, trying to keep her worry from showing. She looked at her eldest son, Samuel, who was trying to distract his younger siblings by drawing pictures on scraps of paper. "Mom," he whispered, "do we have any turkey?" Mary shook her head, her throat tight. She wanted to explain, but the words caught in her chest. Instead, she knelt beside him and said softly, "Not this year, sweetheart. But we'll figure something out." Samuel's eyes widened, but he nodded bravely, trying to mask his disappointment for his younger siblings. Mary's heart ached. The youngest, little Clara, tugged at her sleeve and asked, "Mama, why isn't the house full of smells? Why isn't it like the old Thanksgivings?" Mary hugged her tightly, feeling a tear slip down her cheek. She whispered promises to her children, that they would eat, that they would laugh, and that they would still have a Thanksgiving to remember. But inside, doubt gnawed at her. How could she provide a meal for 6 hungry children with nothing but an empty kitchen and dwindling hope? She moved to the window and gazed out at the snow-covered fields. The ranchers in the neighboring valley were preparing for the holiday, hauling in turkeys, pies, and baskets of produce. She felt a pang of longing mixed with shame. She had always managed on her own, but this year, life had been cruel, leaving her alone to care for her brood. She took a deep breath and whispered a prayer into the cold morning air, asking for guidance, for help, for a miracle. The children, sensing her tension, tried to be cheerful, singing little songs and telling stories, but Mary could see the hunger in their eyes. The quiet desperation of the day weighed heavily on her shoulders. She moved from child to child, brushing hair, ruffling heads, offering hugs, and trying to fill the void with love. But even love couldn't make bread appear, couldn't roast a turkey, couldn't fill empty plates. And yet, she refused to let despair win. She refused to let her children go to bed hungry on this special day. Somewhere deep in her heart, Mary believed that help would come. She didn't know how, or from whom, but she whispered another prayer, stronger this time, and hoped that someone, somewhere, was listening. The wind howled outside, snow swirled against the windows, and the small farmhouse seemed to hold its breath. Mary's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for a sign of hope, a glimmer that this Thanksgiving might not be lost after all. Little did she know, that hope was already on its way, rolling down the snowy road in the form of a wagon filled with plenty. Mary had just returned from checking the snow-blanketed fields when she heard it, a low rumble, like distant thunder. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then the sound grew louder, rolling over the hills and crunching through the thick layer of snow on the driveway. Curiosity mixed with caution, and she slowly opened the front door. Her eyes widened in disbelief. There, trudging through the white landscape, was a large wagon overflowing with food. Turkeys hung from hooks, baskets brimming with potatoes, apples, fresh bread, and pies, all piled high in a rainbow of colors and textures. The driver of the wagon was a rugged-looking rancher, his hat pulled low over his brow and his coat dusted with snow. He waved at Mary with a warm, welcoming smile. "Heard there might be 6 hungry mouths needing a meal," he said, his voice deep and friendly, almost like the rumble of the wagon itself. "Thought you could use a little help." Mary's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to speak, to express gratitude, but the words stuck in her throat. The children, hearing the commotion, ran to the window and pressed their noses against the glass. Their eyes widened in astonishment. Mary motioned for them to stay inside, and she stepped into the cold, letting the rancher guide the wagon closer to the porch. He began unloading the bounty. First came the turkeys, large and golden, wrapped carefully. Then baskets of potatoes, onions, carrots, and other vegetables. Pies with golden crusts, loaves of freshly baked bread, and jars of jam followed. Every item seemed almost magical, as though it had appeared from nowhere. The children could no longer contain themselves. They ran outside, laughter and cheers filling the crisp air. Mary stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed, tears streaming down her cheeks as her children hugged the generous stranger. "Come on now," the rancher said, chuckling, "don't just stand there. Let's get these inside." Mary moved quickly, taking baskets from his hands, her muscles trembling from both excitement and the cold. The children helped too, carrying smaller baskets, their laughter ringing in the air. For the first time in days, Mary felt hope and relief wash over her. She glanced at the rancher, who tipped his hat with a grin, then stepped back to watch the joyful scene. Inside, the kitchen seemed transformed. The counters were no longer bare, the cupboards suddenly filled with possibilities. Mary's hands moved automatically, arranging food on plates, setting the table with newfound joy. The aroma of the roasted turkey already filled the air, mixing with the scent of fresh bread and sweet pies. Her children's chatter and laughter echoed in the small house, banishing the weight of fear that had hung over them for days. Mary realized that this day, once shadowed by worry and hunger, was now brimming with miracles. The rancher had not just brought food, he had brought hope, warmth, and the reminder that kindness could appear when least expected. As the snow continued to fall softly outside, Mary looked around her bustling kitchen, feeling gratitude so deep it made her chest ache. Thanksgiving had arrived, after all. The kitchen was alive with motion and laughter. Mary moved quickly between counters, carving the golden brown turkey and arranging it on the large serving platter. The children darted around, setting plates, arranging silverware, and sneaking bites of bread and butter when they thought she wasn't looking. The aroma of roasted turkey, fresh bread, and sweet pies filled every corner of the small farmhouse, blending with the laughter and chatter that now replaced the tension and worry of the morning. For the first time in weeks, Mary felt the warmth of home wrapping around her like a soft, comforting blanket. Samuel, her eldest, proudly held a basket of mashed potatoes and placed them on the table. "Mom, I think we can make this look like a real Thanksgiving," he exclaimed. Mary smiled at his determination and nodded, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Even little Clara, who had been quietly anxious all morning, ran around with a pie in her hands, barely able to contain her excitement. The rancher's unexpected gift had not only filled their cupboards but had ignited a spark of joy in the children's hearts. Mary paused for a moment and looked out the window. The wagon, once overflowing with food, was now almost empty, the rancher carefully stacking the last baskets before he tipped his hat and waved. He gave a small nod toward the family and began trudging down the snow-covered lane. The children pressed their faces against the glass, waving frantically, imagining him as a real-life Santa Claus. Mary's eyes filled with tears, grateful not only for the food but for the kindness and generosity that had restored her faith in humanity. The family gathered around the table, holding hands as Mary whispered a prayer of thanks. Her voice trembled slightly, and the children mirrored her, their small hands clasped tightly. It was a prayer of gratitude for food, for warmth, and for the miracle that had arrived just when they needed it most. Mary's heart swelled as she looked around at their smiling faces, realizing that this Thanksgiving had become more meaningful than any before. It wasn't just about the food, it was about love, community, and the reminder that help could come when hope seemed lost. As they began to eat, laughter and chatter filled the farmhouse. Stories of past holidays were shared, jokes were told, and the children's eyes sparkled with happiness. Mary carved the turkey carefully, passing plates filled with steaming vegetables and rich, savory gravy. Pies were saved for last, each slice a reward for their patience and a symbol of joy restored. She watched her children savor each bite, their bellies and hearts full, and felt a deep sense of relief. Later, as the meal wound down, Mary realized that the day had transformed into something far greater than she could have imagined. A stranger's kindness had brought more than a feast, it had brought hope, restored faith, and reminded her of the power of compassion. The small farmhouse no longer felt empty or cold. It hummed with warmth, laughter, and love. Thanksgiving, she thought, wasn't just a holiday. It was a celebration of community, generosity, and the miracles that could appear when you least expected them. As the last crumbs of pie were cleared from the table, Mary's children began to yawn, their little bodies exhausted from the excitement, laughter, and joy of the day. She helped them into cozy pajamas, brushing hair and tucking blankets around shoulders. The farmhouse was warm from the oven and the lingering energy of the meal, a stark contrast to the cold, snowy world outside. Mary paused for a moment in the quiet hallway, listening to the soft snores of her youngest, Clara, and the gentle murmurings of the older children drifting off to sleep. A sense of peace settled over her, mingling with the gratitude that had been growing all day. Sitting by the window with a steaming cup of tea, Mary gazed out at the snow-covered fields. The moonlight shimmered on the icy ground, and she imagined the rugged rancher making his way home through the winter night. She smiled, thinking about how his unexpected kindness had turned a day that had seemed so bleak into a celebration of hope and love. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel that maybe, just maybe, miracles were real, and that sometimes they arrived on wagons filled with food and generosity. Mary reflected on the morning's struggle, the fear of facing Thanksgiving without enough to feed her children, the worry that she might let them down, and the silent prayers whispered into the cold wind. It had felt unbearable then, a weight too heavy to carry alone. But now, after a day filled with laughter, warmth, and plenty, she realized that life was sometimes like this, unpredictable, challenging, yet capable of revealing incredible beauty when people showed kindness. The rancher's gift had not only nourished their bodies, but it had also reminded Mary that she wasn't truly alone. She thought about her late husband, and a small smile touched her lips. He had always taught her the value of gratitude, and she understood now that it wasn't just about saying thank you, it was about carrying kindness forward. Mary made a silent promise to herself that she would remember this Thanksgiving not only as a day of unexpected help but as a lesson in generosity. She would look for ways to help others in need, to be the miracle someone might be praying for someday. As the snow continued to fall softly outside, blanketing the farmhouse in quiet white, Mary felt a deep sense of hope settle in her heart. Her children were asleep, their bellies full and spirits bright, and the warmth of love and family filled the small home. It had been a Thanksgiving she would never forget, a day when fear and worry had been replaced with joy, laughter, and the reminder that even in the hardest times, people could make a difference. Finally, Mary blew out the lamp by the window and climbed into bed. She held her hands together in prayer, whispering thanks for the unexpected blessings of the day. The house was quiet now, except for the soft crackle of the dying fire, and Mary closed her eyes with a smile. Thanksgiving was no longer just a holiday, it had become a symbol of hope, community, and the enduring power of human kindness. Outside, the snow fell gently, and inside, hearts were full.